the way economics is being used in our current analysis is not to say, are you actually being advised by economists? Because Polanski is being. It's to say, are you using a certain type of economics? The sphere has been abuzz with talk of Rory Stewart on The Rest Is Politics and what he said to and about Zach Polanski and the economist that he named. So if you don't follow, The Rest Is Politics is run by Rory Stewart and Alistair Campbell, who are two centrist politicians, but Rory is former Tory, Alistair is former Labour. Rory left the Tories at the time of Boris Johnson when things got a bit wacky. Alistair was New Labour, and then obviously they were kicked out of power. But they came together to do this kind of centrist podcast where they bemoan the state of debate and how crazy things have got, how extreme things have got. Why can nobody just talk to each other anymore, etc., etc. Kind of fine, but it's they've had Zach Polanski, who is the new leader of the Green Party, and they've had him on, which was really good that they had him on. Depending on which polls you look at, he could be polling at 20%. Polanski, he's been really popular. He's got a good social media presence, and he's been talking the good talk about everything really, immigration, cost of living crisis and housing. He's been talking the good talk about the environment, of course, being a Green. He's a very progressive candidate, I think. Not explicitly socialist in the same way as like Jeremy Corbyn, but he might as well be. Anyway, so because of his growing popularity, they invited him on to have a chat, and the first half of the chat with Zach was like mostly about his background, his politics, his Jewish heritage, and Israel and Palestine and the genocide and everything like that. And I think that was very good and very congenial. And I think they tended to agree with him, even though I think he has a more overtly radical stance on that. But yeah, that was all kind of fine. But then the second half was about his economics. But the controversy, I think, or the big moment came during the economics chat. And there were a couple of things. But one of them was that they basically wanted to know if Polanski has a good economic plan, which I think is fair enough. Obviously, I'm an economics channel. I'd like Green leader to have a good, fully costed, fully detailed economic plan. Maybe slightly unreasonable to demand that of somebody when it's like not an election, and they're very new. But I think it's fine as a line of questioning, certainly, to probe his economics a bit. But one of the things that Rory Stewart asked him was, who are your favourite economists, or who are the economists that you're setting your watch to, who are going to be your influences when you design your economic policies, because Polanski's talking about things like net zero, right? Green investment. He's talking about, friendly fire. He's talking about reversing austerity. I don't think you can do friendly fire in this, can you? He's talking about reversing austerity, investment in public services, and protecting us from the climate emergency, fully automated luxury communism or anything like that. Oh yeah, he can protect me, can't he, this guy? But then Polanski's answer for who had influenced him was, I believe, Richard Murphy. I've spoken to Richard Murphy on my channel. He has an economics YouTube channel of his own. He's blogged for ages.
The switching station. That's where you'll need to bring the mute.
No ammo. Average Fallout experience. So Richard Murphy. He said Grace Blakely, who I've also spoken to on the channel, who's published loads of best-selling books about economics. And he said Gary Stevenson, who, these days needs no introduction. He appeared on my channel when I was, when he was a bit smaller. Now his channel has 5 times the subscribers of mine, and I'm not bitter about it, Not at all. And, oh, shit. Okay, that was careless. So, and then he also said, finally, Yanis Varoufakis. Now, needless to say, I need to look at my guns. Needless to say, Rory did not appear to take these particular economists very seriously. And indeed, they do a little wrap up once the guest has gone. And in that, Rory said that he was horrified.
But I was horrified beyond belief on the economic stuff.
And I think it was during the interview where Rory was saying, these aren't respected academic economists. They're not qualified academic economists. Which is, firstly, false. Richard Murphy is a professor of economics at Sheffield, I believe. And Yanis Varoufakis obviously is a professor of economics for a long time. He published extensively in game theory. Sometimes it's difficult to tell whether you've died or whether someone else has. And Rory Stewart also incorrectly stated that Gary just has a bachelor's degree in economics as opposed to a postgraduate degree. Now, Gary actually has a master's degree in economics. So there were some fairly basic factual errors
Feels like someone played my head like a
in what Stewart said, because Grace has a master's too. It's not in economics, but her original degree is in PPE. What's going on here, right, is clearly some form of snobbery and some form of class snobbery. So class in the UK, I think, these days has a few different dimensions. One of them is like where you were born. So Rory has been quite classist towards Gary because Gary was on The Rest Is Politics as well. And he was like, oh, I feel like you've got a lot of class anger. And it's like, yeah, mate, fuck you. You've got class anger too. It's just directed in a different way. And because you speak a certain way, you know how to hide it, or you know how to express it in a way that is acceptable to people. Oh, shit. I thought that might have been my guy. So, yeah, there's that, like your class background. You come from a poor family, you have a working class accent, a northern accent or whatever. There's that. There's also the education one, which is quite clear. I do think education is a vector for class in modern Britain. And so having some kind of qualification, in the past it might have been a degree. Now it's probably a postgraduate degree because a degree doesn't really count for as much in the eyes of the elite. And let's be honest, a degree isn't quite what it used to be. That is true. Oh, shit. So there's that aspect of it. But ultimately, when you investigate it a little bit, right, Gary has a postgraduate degree. Grace has a postgraduate degree, and she's posh, right? Grace is super posh. And Yanis Varoufakis and Richard Murphy, as I said, are full-blown economics professors. So, like, what's going on here? What's going on is that... Oh, nice one. Shortest life ever. What's going on is that anybody with economics and politics, but I think economics is one of the main mediators for this, let's say. It's a mediator through which you are able to appear respectable. If you know economics, if you're qualified in economics, if you abide by the economics that Rory and Alistair and the British establishment consider respectable, which is basically, in this country, by the way, more so than in the US, or maybe more so than in any other country, it's balanced budget economics. You know, it's about doing the finances, doing the costs. That's what Rory keeps asking Zach. It's about, you know, have you costed this, right? Can you get it approved by the Treasury? Because the Treasury thinks that the budget should be balanced. Now, Zach's ethos is more of I think an MMT one, the modern monetary theorists, who basically say you don't need a balanced budget. And he said this, and, you know, one of my criticisms of Zach is I do substantively, right, this has all become about class, it's about Rory's dismissiveness, which is fair enough. Substantively, Zach could have been stronger on this point. And he could have expressed the MMT view probably in a more palatable or better way than just... He kept saying, we're a sovereign currency issuer, which is true, but it doesn't really engage with, like, the meat of what we need to do in order to kind of change these institutions so that we can have expansionary policy. And and there was one point where I was a bit like, because he said that he seemed to imply, and I think it was more, I don't know if you sat him down not under duress and asked him, I don't know if he'd actually claimed this, but it sounded like he was saying Japan isn't a sovereign currency issuer, which is like just really, really, really not true. And I think there are a couple of points like that. Like, again, I have critiques of Zach Polanski in that interview. He needed to be better briefed on economics. He didn't know the difference between the debt and the deficit. He didn't know how much the UK is paying in debt interest payments. Like, at the very least, you've got to realise that these are talking points that you're going to have to know. And, you know, I'm going to put it out there. There is more than just political strategy. You should know these things. You need to have an idea of, like, what you're going to do and how you're going to do it. So I have my critiques of Zach Polanski's substantive economics, but the thing is that balanced budget orthodoxy, Treasury style, is just a really dated and limited view of how you approach the state and public spending. There are so many beneficial knock-on effects of expanding public spending, and even more so, there have been these deleterious negative knock-on effects of austerity. Cutting is more harmful than expanding spending is good. That's like loss aversion, or that's what I did my PhD thesis on. It's like a basic fact of life that often withdrawing things, cutting them, getting rid of them, losing something is worse than gaining things is good. So I think austerity's done untold damage, and we need to reverse it, right? And all of those effects were completely ignored. And you look at an institution like the Office for Budget Responsibility, their forecasts are always wrong. You know why? Because economic forecasts are always wrong. And the OBR didn't exist until 2010. George Osborne put it in. And it's enshrined austerity because it adheres to this sort of very narrow idea that cutting, you know, the government budget is going to be like cutting that. Hey. Is going to be like cutting the household budget. There's not enough appreciation of the crucial role that the government plays in the economy. And that is especially true when it's been gutted, as it has done for 15 years in the UK. So it's like you're looking at a government. It's not like we've expanded public spending and investment to the point where it's like, okay, now we're doing sort of 20th century style socialism, lads, and we've actually, we've overextended and we've reached diminishing returns. We're nowhere near that. We're on the part of investment, of state investment, where we're going to get immense returns, like socially and economically. And to be fair to Zach, he did emphasize this point. I remember at one point he was like, look, investment. I want to say one word, investment, or something like that.
If you really want to make an argument that radical, you need to have the numbers, the academic economists, the arguments, the legislation, the package. Otherwise, we can all agree there's something wrong with the current system, but it's very difficult to believe you've got the...
Well, I've got one word for you.
Okay.
Investment. Let's talk about the cost of inaction. This is particularly prevalent in the climate crisis.
So he was quite good on this point, but I just don't think that Alistair Campbell and especially Rory Stewart have a modern view of this. And I think that they think that most academic economists are neoliberal, right? Are like balanced budget, neoliberal, free market type people where growth comes from the private sector and you... Man, okay, it's quite hard to dodge these. That's what it seems like. And that's just not true. I mean, I was thinking about this. If you were to ask me my most influential economists, and I got a lot of respect for Gary, Grace, Yanis, and Richard, right? So I like those people and they have influenced me. But I think in terms of sort of academic / public facing economists. Did I save? I just saved, didn't I? I'm just save scumming my way through this. Sorry, I'm a bit distracted. Not that I'm good at this game anyway. I would probably say the most influential economists, and in my kind of attempt at an objective assessment, if such a thing is possible, I think the most influential economists who are academic professors in the world over the past, since the financial crisis, let's say, Thomas Piketty, who wrote his massive book on inequality, Capital, shot to fame, has been doing bits ever since, like speaking everywhere, writing more books, advising governments, and has always advocated something like a wealth tax, even long before it came onto the agenda recently. Thomas Piketty, and he has just shot to the left. He's like he started, if you read Capital, he's like a sort of French capitalist. He's like, we need... He's Rawlsian, or you know what I mean? We need social care, but he doesn't like critiques of capitalism, he says, lazy critiques of capitalism. Now he seems like a socialist. He's like, yeah, worker democracy, radical redistribution and seize the means of production and all that. Second, I would say Mariana Mazzucato, author of The Entrepreneurial State and a whole bunch of other books which talk about the aggressive role the state can and has taken in investment. Has her own institute at UCL, one of the best regarded universities in the world, Institute of Innovation and Public Purpose, has advised countless governments across the world, very influential in the Biden administration, I think, in their sort of industrial policy and investment that they did. Very influential in Latin America as well. And thirdly, I mean, you could keep going with this because there are more, but let's just finish on Paul Krugman. It's easy to forget about Paul Krugman because he's so influential that he's basically a part of the furniture, but he is an anti-neoliberal economist, right? He's mainstream. Methodologically, he uses a whole bunch of maths. He, in the 90s, he was more neoliberal. He used to critique the left, but he's softened so much recently, and he critiqued Obama from the left, right? And he's Nobel Prize winning. He's got a column in the New York Times, or did he leave actually recently? Because he was I think they were censoring him about Trump, right? Like he's a pretty radical lefty by modern standards. And so for them to act like the economics establishment, the academic economics establishment is neoliberal in the same way as they are, Paul Krugman has been like, run deficits, spend money. Mariana Mazzucato has been like, governments can do things. They can create wealth. They should be investing money. And Thomas Piketty has been like, reduce inequality, radically change your institutions to reduce inequality. The very wealthy are dangerous, right? What does that sound like? Does that sound a bit like the platform of Gary Grace, Richard, Yanis to you? Like maybe they're a bit more radical than Paul Krugman. Okay, I'll grant that. But it's just utterly ridiculous. So Rory and Alistair are in this UK Treasury orthodoxy bubble. Neither of them are qualified in economics. They don't know what they're talking about. And obviously they're just, especially Rory, they're just massive fucking snobs. And I do think that Rory is kind of a good guy in the sense that he's not Boris Johnson, but I think he's ridden the coattails of that for too long. And he has that snobbery ingrained into him. So when he hears something that departs from the views that he hears, across the corridors of Westminster and Whitehall and in his sort of media, establishment media, he immediately assumes that they're not credible, that they're stupid, that they're not real economists. And it's bizarre for me, who is a real economist by that criteria, to see the subject gatekept, especially by people who themselves are definitely not economists, right? Do you understand how strange that is? The way economics is being used in our current analysis is not to say, are you actually being advised by economists? Because Polanski is being. It's to say, are you using a certain type of economics? Because, it's not like Osborne and Cameron in the age of austerity. They had any real economic analysis behind them. The one paper that they had, Reinhardt and Rogoff, which purported to show that government debt that's too high, above 90%, reduces GDP. One was confusing correlation and causation, an elementary fallacy. It wasn't published. It wasn't a published paper. Then it was found to have a horrible mathematical error in it, which, by the way, in slight insider view, I don't think it was an error. I think they did it deliberately. I've been told that by people adjacent to the people that discovered it. Don't want to implicate anybody. But anyway, so if that's the economics that they had, then they weren't real economists, right? But you don't see them dismissed in the same way because they were balanced budget, because they were saying, we've got to cut the government deficit, we've got to, we've got to reduce spending, increase taxes, etc. So I just think it's an utterly false model of economics. And you could say that, like, on my channel, that is the kind of economics that I'm most angry at. It's that, like, economics means you can't do anything good. Economics means you can't stray from the status quo. As if that's respectable, as if that's actually backed by theory or evidence. It's not. Capital E economics, yeah, that's what I've called it in the past. Although I stole that from someone else.